Today, I want to talk about the spectrum of dismissive avoidant attachment because no two avoidants are exactly the same, and I think this will help you understand avoidant attachment better, no matter if you have avoidant attachment yourself or if you have an avoidant in your life. Understanding the spectrum of avoidance helps you understand why two avoidants can be so different. And in the second half of the video, I'd like to explain schizoid personality disorder as an example of severe avoidant attachment. Across the avoidance spectrum, we can see that the higher the avoidance gets, the more the ratio of how much the avoidant wants to have people in their life and how much they prefer to be alone shifts. Avoidants at the lower end of the spectrum have a stronger desire for connection than for aloneness. They are in relationships, and their avoidance shows up in how they interact with the people in their life, for example, by avoiding conflict or other emotional situations. Then we've got avoidants on the middle of the spectrum. These are avoidants that are very conflicted because their desire for connection and relationships and their desire to be alone are equally strong. These are avoidants that will try to have relationships, but especially in intimate relationships, whenever the relationship evolves into something that feels too committed, close, or engulfing to them, they will break it off. Another way avoidants on the middle of the spectrum can be in relationships is if they're the ones to exactly define what will happen in the relationship and when. So they might be in a relationship, but only if their partner accepts their terms of how often they want to meet and what they want to talk about. These are then relationships with minimal contact and minimal emotional vulnerability. And last but not least, we've got avoidants on the high end of the spectrum. These are avoidants that have a stronger desire to be alone than for connection. They'll say things like, relationships are a burden, or I'd rather be alone, it makes life much easier. And as a defense mechanism, they've repressed their desire for connection so much that in their awareness, they often don't have it at all. Avoidants on the very high end of the spectrum fulfill the criteria for a personality disorder, and before that, when they're close to it, it's called a personality style. Personality disorders are ways in which people interact with others that cause distress to them and others. And some personality disorders make people use defensive, dysfunctional coping strategies to create connection and closeness, but in a way that's causing distress. And other personality disorders use dysfunctional defense mechanisms to keep people at a distance and prevent closeness, also in a way that causes distress. And those are the personality disorders that are on the high end of the avoidance spectrum. According to Rainer Sachse, who's one of Germany's leading experts on personality disorders, the personality disorders on the high end of the avoidance spectrum are paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. And remember, each of these can also be seen as a personality style if they're not fully present. They can also mix. It's not uncommon for someone to have a few traits from a few different personality disorders. And if someone does have a personality disorder, that doesn't mean that pattern always has to stay that way. They can change, but in order for that to happen, they'll need therapy. So schizoid, paranoid, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorders are what Rainer Sachse calls distance disorders. These are people that often have subdued emotions. They interpret situations in negatively distorted ways. So when they do have emotions, they're negative. And that stands in the way of them tapping into their full potential because you need positive emotions to do that. Also, by keeping others at a distance that much, their core emotional need for connection isn't fulfilled. And that then shows up as other problems like difficulties concentrating at work or chronic stress at work or addiction. Next, I'd like to discuss schizoid personality disorder as one of these distance disorders to give you an example of a common one on the very high end of the avoidance spectrum. The word schizoid comes from the Greek word schizo, which means cut off, as in cut off from others, or also as in cut off from their own emotions. When someone has a lot of schizoid traits but not the full disorder, they have a schizoid style. These are people that don't like any type of forced gatherings like company outings, but they do have a few, often very few, close relationships and know that they need them too. At the same time, from time to time, they need a hiatus from their relationships, times when they can be completely by themselves, when they can prove to themselves that they can be on their own, when they don't have to consider anybody else, when they can feel themselves more strongly because nobody else is around. They often don't do much to nurture their friendships, like initiating to meet or talk, and that can leave their friends feeling neglected, and over time, their friends might end the friendship. People with a schizoid style would describe themselves as introverts. They love spending time reading or playing video games, getting lost in fantasy, and they can become an expert on a topic that they're very interested in and spend a lot of time with. They seem to have little interest in the outside world. All of that can make it seem like they're autistic, although that's something different. Often this retreat from the world has an aspect of an escape to it, of feeling overwhelmed by life, and is fueled by not being in contact with their talents, interests, desires, and emotions. Adults that grow to become schizoids or develop a schizoid style were often emotionally neglected as kids. Often they got no or very little validation and attention, no or very little physical touch, no guidance, no support or protection. When schizoid traits accumulate and someone moves further down on the avoidance spectrum, now to the very high end of the spectrum, they have the full schizoid personality disorder. These are people that think relationships are a burden, impossible to manage well, and only a source of trouble, conflict, and misunderstanding. They're single, they want to stay single, they keep themselves to themselves, they work at jobs where they don't have to interact with others and spend their free time and vacation on their own. Schizoids often have a verbal and nonverbal communication style that makes them come across as distant, cold, sometimes even arrogant. They don't move their face and show no emotion on it, subconsciously to keep others at a distance and themselves cut off. They don't smile or return smiles. They keep still. They don't gesture. And that makes them seem aloof and dismissive. The messages they send and the way they communicate are, I'm independent, I don't want or need anyone, stay at a distance, don't come over and talk to me, don't expect anything of me, and don't limit me or tell me what to do. Because they're so cut off, they also lack social experience. They often find it hard to understand what's going on socially. They can misread social cues. They don't know how to exchange small talk and can come across as uncharismatic. And because of this lack of experience and their insecurity and the way interactions play out for them, mostly negatively, that then reinforces their original belief that relationships are impossible to navigate. Also because they keep to themselves so much and don't show any emotion or share what's going on with them, others find it hard to understand schizoids, which then leaves schizoids feeling like nobody gets them. Schizoids also avoid self-awareness or self-reflection. They don't like engaging with their own inner world, and they're alienated from it. They systematically ignore their emotions and anything that comes up in their inner world. And that way they don't know what they want, what makes them happy, what their needs and desires are. And that's a huge problem because to create proactively a fulfilling life for yourself, you need to know these things. So that's something they're not able to do, to create a fulfilling life for themselves. The schizoid way of living is living without an internal compass. Instead, schizoids create an image about themselves that they can then deceive themselves into believing. This image is, I don't need anyone, I don't need relationships. Hannah Zaxa calls this a sour grapes strategy. This comes from a story where someone wasn't able to reach grapes and then said, well, they're probably sour anyway. So because you can't or think you can't have something, when you then devalue it by saying, well, it's probably stupid anyway, that's the sour grapes strategy. And that's what schizoids do with relationships. they think they can't have a relationship or friends, so they'll stick with, well, I don't want it anyway. And that is an escape into autonomy and a dysfunctional coping mechanism. The thing is, we all need relationships and connection. That's a fundamental emotional need in any human being, a core emotional need. There is no healthy human being that doesn't need relationships. We need them to different degrees, but we all need them. And when schizoids start reflecting and introspecting, often with a therapist, they can reconnect with their inner world and also their longing for connection. By the way, if this isn't you, but you know someone like this in your life, you can't get them to change by arguing with them about whether or not it's healthy not to have relationships. Before a schizoid feels safe to open up, they will need to feel seen and heard, and that can take a while. Okay, I'll stop here. Till next time, take care, and remember, avoidant attachment can have many different faces.